Embassy of the Dead, Chapter 34, Temporarily Dead. As the door swung open, Jake was greeted by the sound of excited chatter. A queue of around 20 people snaked through a large, brightly lit room. It seemed impossible to Jake that this room could be inside the ruined building that he'd seen from the outside. The woman in front of him turned round. Her hair was standing on end and a wisp of smoke wound up, escaping from somewhere inside her singed boiler suit. "I was electrocuted by a wind turbine," she declared proudly. "Bet they don't get too many of them." Jake smiled politely. It was hard to know what to say. "Turns out you have to queue, even when you're dead, unless you're one of the lucky ones that get seen by an auditor at the location of their haunting." She handed him a leaflet. "Did you get one of these?" Jake took it, surprised to feel the woman's hand against his own. In fact, he couldn't see through her at all, or through anyone else in the queue, and his own hand was now completely solid. Perhaps in the embassy all ghosts had form? He reminded himself to ask Good Morning about it later. Jake scanned the cover of the leaflet, a picture of a semi-translucent man in a cardigan, underneath the title, "So You're a Ghost, a Guide for the Newly Deceased." "You can have it, I've read it already." Jake handed it back to the woman. "It's fine, thanks. I'm actually still alive." The woman smiled sympathetically. "It took me a while to accept things too. We're all on our own journey, aren't we?" Jake smiled politely again. He looked over the woman's shoulder down the slow-moving queue. It led to a large marble desk behind which a woman was talking to the ghost in front of her while constantly tapping on a huge, ancient-looking desktop computer. Hanging above her was a sign that read, "The Newly Dead." To the left of her was another desk manned by a friendly-looking woman talking to a ghostly man holding a mop and bucket. She was sitting under a second sign, "Embassy Employees." To the right was a third desk with no queue. Barely visible over the rim of the desk sat a small man wearing glasses and an extremely bored expression on his face. Above him hung another sign, "The Temporarily Dead." "Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong queue," said Jake, racing forward. The man's brow was creased in concentration as he stared at the screen in front of him. Jake cleared his throat. "Excuse me?" "One moment." The man's finger paused over the full stop key. He didn't look up. Jake leaned forward. "It's an emergency." The man's eyes remained trained on the screen for what felt like forever until he pressed a final key and ripped a sheet from the printer next to him. "How can I help you?" he said, not looking up from the paper in front of him. Jake lowered his voice to a whisper. "I need to speak to Good Morning. It's about—" He paused. How best to explain that he was currently in possession of the damned thing? "It's about something of—" He paused to pick the best words. "Something of a sensitive nature." "I see," said the man, still not looking up. It took a lot to push Jake over the edge. Sab often tried for hours to make him mad and then got mad himself when Jake remained relatively relaxed. Jake guessed he was more of a keep it bottled up on the inside type. Probably not the healthiest way to be, he thought, as he felt the anger inside bubbling to the surface and about to explode. "You do realise you're in the Embassy of the Dead," said the small man. "Yes," said Jake through gritted teeth. The man finally looked up, smiling smugly. "All of the information we deal with is of a sensitive nature." "It's urgent!" blurted out Jake loudly. The chatter in the room died out, and Jake felt multiple pairs of eyes turn to look at him. "I need to find Good Morning," he pleaded. The door opened behind the desk, and a boy about Jake's age came out, pushing an empty cart. Jake watched as the boy switched his cart with another cart full of paperwork and went back through the door. The man slowly stamped the piece of paper in front of him, placed it in the empty cart, then turned to Jake and said, "If I could just take your details, please. License number?" Jake looked at him blankly. "It's on your undoer's card." I lost it, said Jake, thinking on his feet. Then you'll have to fill in form 12B for a replacement card, which I'll then send to the undoers department, who'll need a stamp of approval from renewals and authorisation from the ambassador before it is returned to me, and you will then receive a new licence within 21 to 28 days, at which time you may enter the Embassy of the Dead. Now, I'll just find the correct form. He hopped down from his chair and disappeared from view under the desk, searching in one of the drawers. After a few minutes he reappeared with a thick wedge of paper, but Jake was no longer there, and nor was the cart. What do you think? Does it sound like a bit of a boring place?
Well, it sounds like a very frustrating place. Why didn't Jake have his card?
Because he doesn't have a card. He's not an undoer yet.
Oh, yeah.
So the only people who should be in the Embassy of the Dead are embassy staff, registered undoers, and the dead people. And so the man assumes that Jake's a registered undoer, but of course Jake isn't yet. So let's find out in the next chapter what Jake's got.